There we go. Hopefully. As I check for a second. Okay. We're fine. Absolutely fine. Why are you over there near the DLC button? Are we ready for more Okta? Let's go do it. What? Okay, hold on. If you've ever had long hair, you just find long hairs everywhere. Like, where the fuck did they come from? It's a question I have. Anyway. And so the long night broke. The captains of the Shinsengumi gathered in the common room. The room collectively breathed a sigh of relief. Inoue simply shook his head. Suddenly then, the door slid open. Ito dismissed Nagakura's snide remark, and he turned to face the standing warriors. Desperately, Kondo's eyes flew around the room as if looking for someone to offer an excuse. Okita turned to Saito expectantly, and the latter spoke up at once. Ito brandished another strange smile, stood, nodded, and left the room promptly. What do you mean? Oh. Ito had likely guessed that. Had likely guessed at what took place, but decided not to press the issue. I had looked up just in time to see Sanan-san shuffle through the door. Sanan-san!
化け物を見るような目で見られても困りますよ。
三男さん、起きてていいのかい？
少し気だるいですがね。これも薬の副作用でしょう。あの薬を飲んでしまうと昼間動くことが困難になりますから。
Sanan-san looked a little pale, but it didn't look too difficult for him to stand and speak. But if it's hard for him to move during the day...
私はもう人ではありません。
Those words sunk our hearts heavily. Even the captains fell silent to his solemn admission.
いや、三男君、君が生きていてくれてよかった。我々はそれだけで十分だと思う。
Kondo-san stood and grabbed Sanon's shoulders tightly, his expression bright and endearing. Tears nearly welled in his beaming eyes.
それで腕の方はどうなんです？治ったんですか？
まだ本調子ではありませんからね。自分でもよくわからないのですが。
He lifted his left arm, the arm that before had hung limp at his side, and flexed his hand. It didn't look any different than before his injury.
治っているようですね。少なくとも不便がない程度には。
Thank goodness. In spite of the chaos from last night, his wish to use his arm once more came true. However,
あの薬を飲んだってことは昼間動けねえようになっちまったんだろう。それなのにタイムに参加なんてできるのか。
his voice was calm, almost careless.
解決策はあります。私が死んだことにすればいい。これから私は薬の成功例として羅刹を束ねていこうと思っています。
三男さん、それ本気で言ってるのか？あんた自分が何を言ってるのか分かってるのかよ？
分かっていますとも。長倉君、君こそ忘れたのですか？我々は薬の存在を伏せるよう幕府から命じられているのですよ。私が死んだことにすれば今までのように薬の存在を隠し通すことができる。それにもし薬の持つ副作用を消すことができるのだとすれば、それを使わない手はないでしょう。
They seemed to be against Sanan-san's idea, though no one said anything. Who would want to co-sign a friend to a life of secrecy lived in shadows? But
薬の実験は幕府からのお達しでもあるしな。そうするしかないか。
まあ三男さんが自分で選んだ道ですし、止めたって聞く人じゃないですよね。
よくわかっていますね。その通りですよ。
Hijikata scoffed at Sanan-san's suggestion, and bitterness frothed from his words.
豚書移転の話、冗談じゃ済まされなくなった。三男さんの伊藤派の目から隠すには広い豚書が必要で、ここじゃ狭すぎる。
同意します。薬の研究を続けるのであれば、なおのこと移転を急ぐべきかと。
よし、ろくに寝てねえとこ悪いが、話し合いを始めさせてもらうぜ。雪村、お前は部屋に戻ってろ。ろくに寝てねえだ。
Please excuse me. I bowed to everyone and left the common room. I'm happy the Sana-san was safe, but a whole flurry of new concerns arose. Learning of my father's horrible work. What will become of me? Will I be safe? Such thoughts buzzed heavily in my head as I walked back to my room. Alright. It's June 1865. I need to get a hair tie. Hold on. We've also moved headquarters. Alright, I tied my hair back. I should be fine now. Actually, I think my hair is about as long as Chizuru's. When tied up, anyway. Our emperor had passed, and our year moved from the 2nd of Ganji to the 1st of Kyo. It was... I'm yawning a lot today. Don't mind me! It was 3 months since we'd moved the headquarters to Nishi Honwanji. There's a lot more room, but... more room meant, well, farther to walk. I'd walk through it almost every day for weeks, and I was finally beginning to learn my way around. As I turned a corner near the back of the compound, I caught sight of someone sitting in the shadows. There you are, Sanan-san. Your food is ready. The snow disappeared, the cherry blossoms bloomed and fled, and now the swallows and the heat came. Sanan-san and I exchanged a pair of smiles, and I held out my hands to let the breeze brush across them. It's really gotten warm lately. Really? I didn't think the sun was particularly strong that day, but to Sanan-san, who hid in the shadows and out of sight during the day, it must have been unbearable. The night he changed. Sanan-san's hair turned white, and in his eyes was a thirst for blood. But looking at his peaceful smile now made it hard to imagine such a night was real. If someone told me it was all a bad dream, I wouldn't have believed it. I would have believed it. It wasn't a dream, though, and now Sanan-san spends his days hiding from the sunlight and from others. For just a moment, the sun lit on Sanan's hair. I don't know if it was a trick of the light or simply my mind being foolish, but in that moment, his hair was a brilliant white. No, nothing at all. He looked perfectly normal now, of course. Surely, I thought, I must have simply imagined it. Even if I had, there was no denying that he was the same man who went mad with bloodlust. The fear of the night cast a shadow over my heart. It was unnerving. Heisuke and I made our way through the crowded as usual streets of Kyoto at a brisk pace. You know, I haven't gone out on patrol with you in quite a while, Heisuke. Everything was fine, and they were kind to me.
そっか。ならいいけど。親父さんの行方はどうなんだ？手がかりとか見つかったか？
None at all.
やっぱ見つからねえか。俺も江戸に戻った時、お前の家の様子を見に行ってみたんだけどな。人が戻ってきた様子はなかったし、どこに行っちまったんだろうな。
The somberness of Heisuke's expression started to rub off on me. Now I was depressed. Oh. Thank you for taking the time to look anyway.
いや、別に礼を言われるようなことじゃねえって。そもそもお前が今みてえに自由に外に出られねえのも、元はといえば俺たちの。
Heisuke? Heisuke stopped himself mid-sentence, which was jarring. Ever since he returned from Meadow, he looked glum. Heisuke? How about you? It's been a while since you were in Kyoto. Does it seem different from Meadow?
そうだな。街も人も結構変わった気がする。
I wonder what was going through his head. Did something happen to him in Edo? His sudden change of character confused me. Heisuke's head jerked up slightly and he looked across the street. He stood on his toes and waved.
おい、ソージ、そっちの様子はどうだった？特に何も。いつも通りだね。
Okuta was out on patrol as well, although his route took him through a different part of the city.
でも、将軍上洛の時には忙しくなるんじゃないかな。
The Shogun's coming to visit Kyoto?
そう。近藤さんも張り切ってるよ。近藤さん、家持公のことをすごく尊敬してるから。
Ah, I see. I hope it turns out well. Right, Heisuke?
まあ、近藤さんはそうだろうな。
Something had really gotten into him. I glanced at Okuta to see if he noticed anything. Okuta, are you alright?
平気だよ。ちょっと風邪をひいちゃったみたい。
Ah, I see. Well, please take care of yourself. I have medicine to treat colds, so I'll give you some when we return.
そう。ありがとう。君でもごくたまに役に立つことがあるんだね。
What's the matter? Okuta's eyes looked past me, and suddenly something caught his attention off to the side.
おい小娘、断るとはどういう了見だ？
やめてください。話して。
民草のために日々上位を論ずる我ら志士に尺の一つや二つ自分からするのが当然であろうが。
Across the street, a clump of perhaps 3 or 4 men were harassing a young girl. Okita! Heisuke!
わかってるって。お前はここで待ってろ。
But it appeared that Okita got to them first.
やれやれ。上位って言葉も君たちに使われるんじゃかわいそうだよ。
The usual crowd shuffled away from Okita and the men as quickly as they could. No one wanted to be near the sight of unsheathed blades. The Ronin's eyes found Okita's jacket, and the men stiffened.
その羽織、新選組か？
知ってるなら話が早いな。どうする？
His lips curled into a predatory smile as his hand gripped his sword. There was no mirth in that rictus grin, and the Ronin's face grew much paler. Their moods were not totally deflated yet, as their ringleader made one more attempt.
くそ、幕府の犬が。
いいからとっとと失せろって。
The sight of two Shinsengumi blue jackets standing shoulder to shoulder was enough to deter the men.
貴様ら覚えておれ。
The last of the color drained from their faces, and they turned tail and ran.
俺たちを見てとっとと逃げ出すぐらいなら最初からあんな真似するなっての。
You aren't going after them? Arrest them?
どんな罪で？君って意外と過激だな。
I didn't really mean it like that. Because the Okita will take any words you say and fucking twist them!
助けてくださってありがとうございました。私、南雲薫と申します。
I watched as the girl gave Okita a quick bow. She was so refined, so ladylike. Even dressed like a girl, I doubted I could ever be as elegant as her. I'd only just begun to feel sorry for myself when suddenly I felt a hand on my arm. Okita!
いいから、この子の横に立って。
He shoved me next to the girl who he just rescued, then stepped back to stroke his chin thoughtfully. We're just gonna sit here for a minute while I take some water. That was some nice water. No. Okta. I glanced nervously towards the girl and attempted to smile kindly under the circumstances. The smile she gave me in return was beautiful, but there was something about it that seemed odd. She seems familiar.
やっぱりよく似てるね、二人とも。
We look alike? That's when I finally realized. She was identical to whom I saw in the mirror.
そっか、俺は全然似てないと思うけどな。
いや、似てるよ。きっとこの子が女装したらそっくりになると思うな。
沖田さん、この方困ってらっしゃいますよ。
I had to say something, but what? Perhaps she saw through my confusion, or perhaps it was something else.
きちんとお礼をしたいのですけれど、今は所用がありまして。ご無礼、ご容赦くださいね。このご恩はまたいずれ。新選組の沖田総司さん。
With that, the girl who called herself Kaoru disappeared into the crowds of Kyoto, although the uneasiness created by her presence remained.
おいおい、ありゃ掃除に気でもあるんじゃねえの？
今のがそう見えたんなら、平助は一生佐野さんに勝てないよね。
どういう意味だよ？
Their back and forth continued, but my mind was elsewhere. Last night's rain left a number of puddles on the road, and when I looked into them, I saw a strange girl who looked just like me. Kaoru, huh? Wind caught the surface of the puddle, sending a flurry of ripples across it.
おい、そろそろ豚舎に戻るぞ。
I'm coming! I turned and ran towards Heisuke and Okita, already on their way back to headquarters. The temple was much larger than the compound in Mibu, as advertised. The whole Shinsengumi could gather in the common room with space to spare. As Kondo-san spoke, his voice echoed grandly throughout the hall. Standing before Kondo-san were the many proud men under his leadership with glowing expressions.
皆も徳川第14代将軍徳川家茂公が上洛されるという話は聞き及んでいると思う。その上洛に伴い公が二条城に入られるまで新選組総力をもって警護の任に当たるべしとの要請を受けた。
将軍公の警護を新選組が？
こりゃとんでもねえ大出世だな。
池田屋や金門の変の活躍でお偉いさん方も俺たちの働きを認めざるを得なかったんだろうよ。
警護中は文字通り僕らの刀に国の行く末がかかってるってことですか？
そういうことだ。てめえら気合い入れていけよ。
将軍公の警護とはまた大役ですな。
本当に三男さんが生きていればどれほどお喜びになったことか。本当に惜しい方を亡くしましたわね。
Ito wiped crocodile tears away from his eyes with a silk handkerchief. Again, because he fucking would. Ito and his followers were told Sanan-san had died. In fact, the entire incident surrounding his transformation had been covered up. Only a few of the men of the Shinsengumi knew the truth.
伊藤さん、こたびの幕命を立派に成し遂げることこそ亡くなった三男君が真に望んでいることだと思います。
分かっていますわ。私たちの名を天下に広く知らしめる絶好の機会ですものね。
ともあれ、これから忙しくなりますな。
まずはタイの編成を考えねば。とりあえず俺とトシ、それからソウジ。
待ってくれ近藤さん。ソウジは今回外してやってくれねえか。
なぜ
だ？なんでも風邪が治らねえとかでな。養生しろって散々言ってるのによ。
本当か？大丈夫なのかソウジ？
大した風邪じゃないんですけどね。土方さんは大げさなんですよ。
何言ってやがるんだ。さっきも咳してただろうが。
それ薬を売りつけるための工場ですか？何を言われても石田三役は買いませんよ。
そんなんじゃねえよ。いいから言う通りにしろ。
I gave Okito some pretty strong medicine not too long ago. I wonder if that didn't work. Or maybe he doesn't have a cold, but rather he's inhaling dust from the lack of cleaning here. Then suddenly, someone raised his hand.
平介、どうしたんだね。何か気になることでもあるのか？
あのさ、近藤さん、実は俺もちょっと調子が。
なんだ、平介も風邪か？気をつけないといかんぞ。せっかくの晴れ舞台、全員揃って家持公をお迎えしたかったのだがな。
すいません。
ああ、いや、責めたわけではないんだ。体調は大事だからな。いずれまた機会もあるであろうし、二人にはその時存分に働いてもらいたい。
Kondo-san and Hijikata-san continued to discuss his formation, but suddenly Hijikata-san turned to me.
そういや雪村、お前はどうするんだ？
え？
ほうけてるんじゃねえよ。お前は警護に参加するのかって聞いてんだ。
I can go too?
無論構わんとも。君も今や新選組の一員と言っても過言ではない。ぜひ参加してくれ。
Could I really go? I hesitated for a moment, confused, and Okita laughed.
まあ言ってもいいんじゃない？そんなに危険もなさそうだしね。
長州藩士は今日に出入りできねえから、切った張ったの騒ぎにはならねえだろうし。
What should I do? I was just a little concerned about a person like me, who's not a warrior coming along, but I was feeling emotionally strained with no leads of my father turning up on rounds. I'll go!
よし、わかった。お前には伝令やら使いっ走りを頼むことになると思うがな。
See, whenever Hijikata pulls his face, it's so fucking rare. I just... Ah!
こき使ってやるから覚悟しとけ。
In the early days of the Tokugawa shogunate, Nijo Castle was a place for the shogun to stay on his way to the capital. It's been a while since the shogun actually stayed in it, though. We'd met the shogun on the road and begun our escort about 30 minutes earlier, and arrived at the castle relatively recently. By now, I imagined. Kondo-san, Nagakura, Inoue, and the men were greeting the officials and other important people in the shogun's retinue. Well, I've got a job to do too. It was my job to tell soldiers when to change shifts and to carry messages back and forth. A glorified errand girl, in other words. I didn't see myself as being useless, though, I think. I've come with a message.
なんだ、お前が伝達係かよ。ここは遊び場じゃねえんだぜ。
Well, I'm not here to play.
へえ、そうかよ。じゃあまともな刀も刺してないお前が何しに来てるんだ？
I've come here to do what I can. Would you mind it if we stopped playing games?
言ってみろ。
The chief is going around, paying his respects to the people in the castle. Everyone else continue with the guard.
わかった。確かに伝達は聞いたぜ。
Eh? That's it? It's that simple?
おい。なんだそのバカ面は。俺が伝達を聞いたのがそんなにおかしいか。
Well, no, I just...
仕事は仕事だからな。市場を挟むつもりはねえんだよ。ほら、伝達は聞いたんだ。さっさと行け。
Miki and I never really got on the best of terms, but maybe he's a responsible person. I want to find out more about Miki. And I don't know if we're going to get that chance. But we'll see. After he shooed me away, I continued attending to my duties as a messenger. In the surroundings of Nijo Castle, I can see the warriors wearing a white uniform, which was different than the afternoon uniform. They don't seem too nervous. But I guess it makes sense. Some of the Imperial Nationalist extremists were driven out of Kyoto, and many warriors fled. There's no way anything would happen. A sudden chill ran down the length of my spine. I froze. I knew the feeling. The length of cold steel seeking entry into your flesh, eyes shining with a lust for blood and violence. Since I'd begun living with the Shinsengumi, I felt it more than once. Bloodlust. My eyes were drawn to the roof where no one would think to look. A large wall cast a shadow, shielding a section of the roof from the moonlight. There they stood. You! They looked very distinctive, unlike any soldier I'd seen before. The 3 sets of piercing eyes scattered my thoughts, making it hard to think. I had recognized them. Now I had to put names to faces. Chikage Kazuma. Kyuju Amagiri. Kyo Shiranui. They were connected to both the Satsuma and the Chosu, and they made an effort to impede the Shinsengumi at Ikeda and again at Hamaguri. Why are you here?
そのなぜっつうのはどうやってここに立ち入ったかを聞いてやがんのか。だったら答えは簡単だ。俺ら鬼の一族には人間が作る障害なんざ意味をなさねえんだよ。
我々はある目的のためにここに来た。君を探していたのです。
What? My heart was pounding so hard it could burst. Why do these men know my name? I don't understand. A demon? What do you mean? And what are you here for? No, you must be joking.
鬼を知らぬだと本気で言っている。
He stepped forward, cloaked in shadows. When Amagiri spoke, it was calm and peaceful, as if he were reasoning with a frightened child.
君は負った傷がすぐに癒えませんか。
I held my breath.
波の人間とは思えぬほど怪我の治りが早くありませんか。
How does he know my secret? I've never revealed it to anyone before. Well, Words struggled to come to mind, and just as I was about to deny their accusations...
ああ？なんなら血ぶちまけて証明した方が早いか？
Shiranui's gun glistened eerily.
知らぬ。貴様貴重な女鬼に傷を負わせるつもりか。
んなこと言われてもこいつの往生際が悪いんだからしょうがねえだろうが。
After Kazuma glared at Shiranui, his eyes drifted towards the kodachi on my hip again.
多くは語らぬ。鬼を示す生と東の鬼が持つ子たち。証拠としては十分です。
My family name? What was wrong with Yukimura? I don't understand what he was saying, and the cold sweat started inching down my spine.
言っておく。お前を連れて行くのに同意などいらん。女鬼は貴重だ。共に来い。
His hand stretched out from the darkness, pale and grasping like the tentacle of some hideous subterranean monster. Then a blade flickered through the night.
おいおい、合いびきならもう少し色気のある場所を選んだ方がいいんじゃねえか。
Hey, Harada!
またお前たちか。田舎の犬は目端だけは聞くと見える。
それはこちらのセリフだ。
Harada! Saito-san! My legs almost collapsed, as if the now shattered tension was the only thing keeping me standing. I teetered backwards, my balance momentarily lost. A strong senri hand caught me and pulled me back, its grip harsh as steel.
下がってろ。
Hijikata-san. One hand guided me around behind him, as the other drew his sword.
将軍の首でも取りに来たかと思えば、こんなガキ一人に一体何の用。
将軍の貴様らも今はどうでもいい。これは我ら鬼の問題だ。
鬼だと。
His eyes narrowed. Hijikata seemed perplexed by Kazuma's statement, as if contemplating the possibility of its truth.
こいつの面を拝むのは金門の変以来だな。
腐れんってとこか。大して嬉しくもねえがな。再会という意味ではこちらも同じくだ。だが何の考えもわかん
我々の邪魔立てをするつもりですか。ならば
The tension was so thick in the air that I could scarcely breathe. They were a powder keg ready to explode. Even the slightest movement could set them off. It wasn't like I could do much. But I still wanted to help them, so I grabbed my sword.
副長たちの心配は無用だ。
Yamazaki? When did you...
副長の命だ。君はこのまま俺が屯所まで連れて行く。
Then you're telling me to run away?
その通りだ。君がここにいてもできることは何もない。
I mean, he may be right, but... We're going back to the headquarters! We're not brave this route. We're not brave this route. Even as I ran back to the headquarters with Yamazaki, I couldn't shake the fear in my heart. When I finally got to the compounds, I still felt nervous, and I could do nothing but stare into the blank darkness behind me.
もう大丈夫だ。さすがにここまで追ってはこれまい。
I think it's but. Is it but? It's but. But...
不安なところ申し訳ないが、俺は副長たちのところへ戻らなくてはならない。皆将軍校の警護に出ているから、今の屯所に大使はほとんど残っていない。沖田さんか東堂さんのところにいるのがいいだろう。そこが最も安全だ。
Understood.
では、後のことは頼んだぞ。
With that, he disappeared back into the darkness. Suddenly, the night felt very quiet. The word demon echoed through my head, and their faces floated in front of my eyes. I shook my head. As the temple came back into focus, I felt very, very alone. As Yamazaki said, I should go find Okita or Hesuke. But whom should I look for? Well, we're doing Okita's route, so I think the answer is pretty fucking obvious.
あれ
Okita looked up from cleaning his sword as I entered the hall.
二条城に行ってるんじゃなかったっけ。どうしたの一人で。
Well,
あ、わかった。
there's that smile again. What do you know?
さては何か失敗して土方さんに追い返されたんでしょ。
Something like that.
あのさ、そんな引きつった顔で返事されても全然からかいがいがないんだけど。
Good!
何があったのか聞かせてくれるかな。
Well, still feeling upset, I told Okita about the incident that unfolded in Nijo Castle. The minute I mentioned Kazuma's name, Okita's eyes lit up.
へえ、そうなの。風間千景。あいつが来てたんだ。あいつらが来るって分かってれば、意地でも言ったんだけどな。
What? Of course he could have! No, you're sick! Hijikata-san told you to rest.
うるさいな。そもそも君が悪いんじゃない。君にもらった薬、全然効か。
Okita! For just a moment, all colors but one faded away. I forgot about demons and castles upon seeing one thing. The sickly red splatter across Okita's hand and mouth. Are you okay? I'll go get someone. Heisuke!
ダメだ
His voice was rough and strained, but filled with unexpected rage. He wiped the blood from his mouth and glared at me over the top of his hand. From under his bangs, his eyes, burning with anger, nailed me to the floor.
今見たことは忘れて大丈夫ただ喉が傷ついただけだよ
Back when I was in Edo, I was helping my father out at his clinic. There were a few times where I'd see patients who'd cough up blood from coughing too much. But what I just saw was something else. Okita.
聞こえなかった忘れろって言ったでしょ
He was so adamant about me not helping him, so it was difficult to know how to react. What could I tell him? I won't tell anyone. But please, for me, get some rest today. Please?
ありがとうそれに今から二条城に行っても間に合わないだろうしねほんと間が悪いな
He grumbled and complained like a child, but before long I convinced him to lay down and rest. The words of the men who claimed to be demons lingered in my heart. There were so many things for me to be worried about. However, more than any of that, I was just worried about the man sick in front of me. I continued to eye Okita, who slept with his back faced towards me, as I watched the dawn slowly emerge through the long, cold night. Since then, once the rest of the men returned, there was a meeting among the captains. The subject of the meeting was that 3 men at Nijo Castle, Chikage Kazuma, Kyujo Amagiri, and Kyo Shiranui. They called themselves demons, and their previous encounters with the Shinsengumi suggested they were somehow involved with the Satsuma and Chosu. The Satsuma were the most powerful domain in the opposition domain, and the Chosu were publicly expressive of their dissent towards the shogunate. The Chosu were essentially enemies of the court. I don't know how the 3 men are supposedly affiliated with the domains, but it was abundantly clear that they were not to be dealt with carelessly. There was another problem, however. Why had they come for me? They said I was one of them, and knew about my family name and my kodachi. But how? My name is Chizuru Yukimura. I'm the daughter of my father and my mother. I'm a normal girl, nothing out of the ordinary. But who am I? We all know what's next, right? The compound was alive with noise and movement. I passed several soldiers in the hall, each one of them excited about something. What was going on?
冗談じゃありませんよ、まったく。
Ito? Is something wrong?
どうしたもこうしたもありませんよ。私がなんであんな野蛮人どもと同じ部屋で肌を晒さなくてはならないの？
Ito's explanation was utterly useless. I was completely confused. Is there something going on today? Ito-san did his best to collect himself, shakily adjusting his hair and clothing before he spoke.
将軍上洛の時に近藤さんと意気投合したお医者様が屯所にいらしてるのよ。大使たちの健康診断を行うとかの名目で。
With a disdainful sniff, he glared pointedly across the hall, towards the area he'd just left. The men were getting physical checkups, that much I knew. Given my particular situation, I had been exempt by the captains, who also gave me special instruction to stay away.
あのハゲ坊主じゃなくてお医者様ったら皆の前で私に着物を脱げとおっしゃるのよ。拒んだら無理やり脱がせようとするし、それにあの大使たちの態度、まるで野獣みたいでしたわ。
Savages seemed a bit strong. At any rate, perhaps I should go see just what a physical entailed. I was a doctor's daughter, after all. What's this doctor's name?
確か松本良順とか言ったかしら。
What? Wait, Matsumoto sensei.
何よその反応。知り合いなの？
When I first came to Kyoto, my plan was to find Matsumoto sensei. My father told me that I could rely on the man if I ever needed anything. Unfortunately, he was away on business when I'd arrived, and after that, I'm going to go watch the physical exams. There was no time to waste. I'd like to think, since we're disguised as a boy, Ito's like, is that boy gay? That's what my head thought right there. Is this it? I could hear loud voices from inside. Oh. The scene froze me in place. Here we go.
次の人。
おう、俺の番だな。一丁頼みます先生。ふっ、どうすか。剣術一筋で鍛えに鍛えたこの体。
新八さんの場合、体は頑丈だもん。見てもらうのは頭の方だよな。あ？
余計なこと言ってると締めるぞ、ヘスケ。
長倉新八って。よし、問題ない。次。
先生、もっとちゃんと見てくれよ。
いやいや、申し分ない健康体だ。
新八、後ろが使えてるんだからさっさと終わらせろって。
そうじゃなくってよ、もっと他に見るところがあんだろ。鍛え抜かれた鋼のようなこの筋肉とか、仁王像みたいに屈強そうな体型とか。
診察は見てもらうもので見せつけるものでさっさとどけ。
It wasn't difficult to see why Ito-san was desperate to escape. I couldn't imagine him as part of such a display. What should I do? I feel like it's rude to intrude.
雪村君、こんなところでどうかしたんだ。
Oh, Yamazaki. Hello. I heard that Matsumoto sensei was here. Yamazaki didn't look like he was in the mood to tolerate me snooping, so he went to the point. Which is, it's just Yamazaki in general.
なるほど。松本先生に何か話がある。君のことはある程度聞いている。事情はおおよそ分かった。だが、診察がなかなか終わらないようだ。俺に任せてくれ。
What should I do? Yes, please! Especially if it's Yamazaki doing it for us. Are you sure? Then yes, please do so.
わかった。少し待っていてくれ。
Yamazaki went over to Matsumoto sensei. Whoops.
松本先生、軽い症状のものなら俺が代わりに見ます。そろそろ休憩してはどうですか。
ではそうさせてもらおうか。
I waited outside for Matsumoto sensei until he stepped out of the examination room. すみません。He looked at me for a moment, his eyes narrowed in curiosity.
薬の補充も兼ねて休憩にしようか。君、ちょっと手伝ってくれるかね。
はい。What luck? Matsumoto sensei.
松本先生、雪村君。
今度さん。
おお、早速会えたようだな。はい、おかげさまで。感謝しております。
What? I was utterly lost. Matsumoto sensei laid a gentle hand on my shoulder.
私は君に会うためにここに来たんだよ。高堂さんの娘さんがここに身を寄せていると近藤さんが教えてくれたんだ。
I see.
高堂さんと松本先生が懇意にしていたことは俺も知っていたけどな。何か高堂さんの手がかりになればと思い、松本先生が今日に戻ってすぐに連絡を取った。
The Shinsengumi had their own reasons for wanting my father around, but Matsumoto sensei's appearance was still cause for joy. Thank you, both of you. They smiled. Matsumoto sensei then explained he had just barely missed me when he left for Edo as I came to Kyoto. He had received all my letters, but once he finally returned, he had no idea where I was, and consequently couldn't find me.
すれ違いだったとはいえ、辛い思いをさせてしまったようだ。君がここにいる事情は分かっておるよ。何か不自由なことはないかね。
No, I'm doing all right. So, Matsumoto sensei, about my father. His face took on a grim cast, and before he even spoke, I knew what his response would be.
残念ながら、私も高堂さんの居場所は知らないんだ。
I see. The defeated tone of my voice surprised me. I suppose on some level I believe Matsumoto sensei had some miraculous revelation about my father. Foolish of me, of course, but that didn't make the truth any less devastating. Kondo-san simply nodded.
君はここにいることで、あの薬に関わってしまったようだね。あの薬、つまり高堂さんが新選組で行っていた研究のことについてだが。
Yes, I knew what he meant. The experiments my father conducted with some strange concoction that could make people go mad. Please tell me about it. I want to know everything my father was doing. He nodded.
高堂さんが幕命を受け、新選組で行っていたのは羅刹を生み出す実験だった。羅刹とはすなわち鬼神のごとき力と驚異的な治癒能力を持つ人間のことだ。
Furies. This term seemed so familiar. Then I realized I'd overheard some of the men talking about it.
そうじゃ。めったなこと言うもんじゃねえ。幹部が羅刹になってどうするんだよ。
もう羅刹ってのは薬を飲んだら怪我も治っちまう。
羅刹っていうのはかわいそうな子たちのことだ。
してその羅刹を生み出したのは落ち水という薬だ。これは西洋ではエリクサー、中華では先端と呼ばれるものに値する。つまるところ不老不死の霊薬みたいなものだ。
Furies. Water of life. Or I could say Rasatsu. Oh fuck, I forgot how to say water of life. Oh fuck, no! Oni Ochimizu? Fuck. It sounded more like something from a fairy tale rather than real life. But there was something in Matsumoto Sensei's tone of voice that said he was telling the truth. I've already heard about how it makes you strong and hard to kill. But doesn't it cause so much pain that it makes most people go crazy? And even if you survive that, even the smell of blood can make you go crazy again. Matsumoto Sensei nodded slowly, then pinched the bridge of his nose with his thumb and forefinger. He looked very tired. Hey. They were human, but not human. Perhaps they were almost entirely different now? I couldn't see how this water of life could ever be used for good. Even if it had healed Sanan-san's arm, he'd suffer greatly in the process. Why? It sounded more like a moan than a question. My father would never want to ruin the life of another, but because of what he'd done, people suffered and some even died. Why was my father doing this? But it wasn't just my father. I'm sure no one involved expected such a terrible outcome.
だからこそ両親の呵責に耐えかねた行動さんはここを去ったんだろう。しかしあれは幕府が新選組の人材不足を補うために授けてくださった知恵でもあるんです。
The doctor only shook his head.
あの計画は失敗だ。行わない方がいい。幕府も見切りをつけているはずだ。
Kondo-san frowned, perhaps unhappy that Matsumoto-sensei would question the shogunate's original decision.
あの薬を飲んだ大使たちがどうなったか、近藤さんもよく知ってるだろう。あの計画は人道的に決して許されるもんじゃない。
Kondo gave a non-committal grunt and fell silent. I was sure Kondo-san knew just how dangerous it was to use the water of life, but the shogunate had come to him with a request. Perhaps he couldn't refuse, even if he wanted to. Silence felt like a thick blanket.
たとえ将軍公の御殿医を務めておられる方のお言葉といえど、大使でもない方に口を差し挟まれる筋合いはありません。
Sanan-san? His face was pale as moonlight, as if he was a walking corpse. Is it okay for you to be up right now?
そんなんか休んでいた方がいいのではないか。顔色が悪いぞ。
ご心配なく。
He bowed quickly, his mouth a composed line, and turned to regard the doctor with a cool gaze.
我々は我々の裁量で例の薬を有効に活用させていただいています。
しかし危険だ。あの薬は人が扱えるような代物じゃない。
研究は続いています。そしてこの私という成功例もあります。
As Sanan did indeed prove, it was possible to drink the water of life and retain your sanity. It just wasn't easy.
一見平気そうに見えるかもしれんが、体のどこかに相当無理をかけていることも考えられるぞ。
私は至って健康ですよ。今後も研究と改良を重ねれば薬の質が上がるのは明白です。
そのためにさらに多くの大使を犠牲にするつもりかね。成功するかどうかもわからん実験に大使を付き合わせるのは生命を冒涜しているとしか思えんが。
彼らは我々の礎となったのです。無駄死にではありません。
しかしだな。
まあまあ、松本先生も三男君も落ち着いて。この話は後日改めてということにしないか。
It was my private opinion that they were unlikely to agree, no matter what time they discussed the subject, but I felt it was polite to keep quiet.
そうだな。わかった。
There seemed to be very little common ground between them, but both arguments had merit. Kondo-san had likely seen this as well, and he chose to end things before it got unpleasant.
近藤さんがそうおっしゃるのであれば。
Sanan-san's face betrayed nothing of what he might be thinking, even when the corner of his mouth quirked up into a beginning of a smile. He bowed quietly and left as swiftly as he arrived.
そういえば先生、健康診断の方はどうでしたかな。
ああ、それなんだがな。頭を抱えたよ。
え、それは一体なぜ？
なぜも何も。怪我人や病人を合計したら全大使の3分の1近くになるじゃないか。
What?
なんとじゃないぞ近藤さん。あんたらは今まで何をやってたんだ。切り傷から渋り腹まで。この豚書は病の見本市だぞ。
面目ない。まさかそんなことになっていたとは。
まずは病室を用意してそこに病人を運び込んでくれ。それから豚書を清潔にしてもらわんと話にならん。
承知しました。すぐに取り掛かります。
Cleaning time! So we were ordered to clean the entire compound.
ったく、何なんだよ大掃除って。俺は掃除とか整理整頓がこの世で一番嫌いなのによ。
ぐちゃぐちゃ言ってないで、さっさとそこのタンスを持ち上げてくれって。散々自慢してた体力を披露するいい機会じゃねえか。うわー、ネズミが出た。
落ち着け、大事はない。どうやらそこにある握り飯を餌にしていたようだな。
本当だ。誰だよ、食い残しの握り飯をこんなところに隠してたやつ。
まったく、なぜ私がこのような雑用に駆り出されなければならんのだ。そもそも私は軍略が専門だというのに。
いいじゃねえか。いつも自慢してる甲州流なんちゃらでパパッと終わらせてくれ。
黙れ。私の甲州流軍学はこのようなくだらぬ役目のためにあるものではない。
原田も人が悪いな。こいつが盲信してる時代遅れの兵法なんて、このご時世掃除の役にも立たないだろう。
ミキ君、言葉に気をつけたまえ。確かに洋楽には劣るかもしれんが、甲州流軍学は決して時代遅れではなく。
近藤さんだ。
近藤局長、ご覧ください。先ほどまで足の踏み場もないほどだった部屋が私の指導でここまで。局長は？
Hakuda realized Kondo-san was nowhere to be seen, and he glared at Harada.
引っかかり
原田貴様測ったな。
ぶつくさ文句言ったりペコペコしたり怒ったり忙しいなあんたも。そうやって相手によってコロコロ態度変えてて疲れねえか。
Hi everyone. I washed the rags. Please use this when you wipe the floor.
あありがとうよ。
Despite being upset because of chore duty, the men swiftly cleaned the room as a team. Matsumoto-sensei came the next day to inspect the cleanliness of the compounds.
まあまあ綺麗になったじゃないか。
だろ、この筋肉は飾りじゃねって先生もようやく分かってくれたみてえだな。
人を動かすという点に関しては軍略も掃除もさして変わりませぬゆえ。
あんた文句言ってただけだろう
でも掃除は一日休んでたんだろ。ずるいよな、みんな頑張ってる時に。
しょうがないじゃない。土方さんが過保護なんだから。
お前が変な咳するからだろうが。養生しねえからいつまでも治らねえんだよ。
しかしやはりこうして片付いていると気分がいいものです。
まあな、うちの子もんだ。これはこれで悪くね
え。よし、これからは毎日掃除するか。
おう、頼んだぜ平助。
なんで俺だけなんだよ。体力自慢の新発さんが真っ先に働くべきだろ。
I'll help too, Heisuke.
そっか。そんじゃ明日から二人で頑張ろうな。新発さんなんて放っておいて。
おいおい、ちょっと待てって。誰もやらねえとは言ってねえだろ。
お、そこにまだゴミがあるじゃねえか。ちょうどいい、捨ててこい新八。
いや、だから明日からだろなあ平助。
片付けたそばから暴れるな。誇りが立つ。
I was enjoying the banter when I noticed something. I'm gonna go get water, because I am out. Be right back. Take a break and stretch your legs. Because y'all probably been sitting as much as I have. We're gonna try to make it through this scene that's coming up, and then end the stream because I just heard thunder, which is not the best thing you'd want to hear while streaming. Alright. Let's do this. Or maybe you heard it there. I don't know if it was loud enough. Oh. I could see Okita and Matsumoto-sensei outside, walking off somewhere together. Where could they be going, I wondered. Well, this time, we're actually worried about Okita. Oh, the rain's coming. What were Okita and Matsumoto-sensei doing? Was Okita going to talk to the doctor about his cough? He was coughing an awful lot lately. Now that I thought about it, was he alright? I decided to follow them. Unfortunately, I waited too long, and by the time I made my way outside, they were gone. I think they went this way. Shimada! Shimada, have you seen Okita and the doctor? Thank you! Goodbye. I saw him walk off and it got me thinking. The courtyard. Should I try and catch up, or should I go around the back to reach the courtyard before they did? We catch up. Yeah, we catch up. I figured my best course of Fuck. I figured my best course of action was to follow them and hope I could catch up. And there they were. Just like Shimada had said. I could see Okita and the doctor sitting on a bench talking. Their expressions were grim, so I kept my distance and hid as well as I could. Eavesdropping was not something I was proud of, but I had a terrible feeling about Okita. For a second, as the thunder kicked in, my heart stopped. A shiver ran down my spine and suddenly I felt very, very cold. Did he just say... Okita has...
驚かないのか。
そりゃただの風がこんなに長引くはずもないですしね。
Okita has tuberculosis? It was all I could do to keep from screaming. My whole body shook.
でも面と向かって言われるとさすがに困ったな。
笑い事ではなかろ
う。これでも困ってるんですけどね。
老害の一番の薬は西洋だ。新選組を離れて精のつくものを食べてゆっくり体を休めなきゃいかん。
それはできません。
そうせんと体は悪くなるばかりだぞ。今はそうやって平気なふりができても、いずれ布団から起き上がることすらできなくなる。
じゃあその時までここにいますよ。血を吐きながらそれでも刀を取ります。
なぜそれほどまでここにいたいんだね。
僕は新選組の剣ですから、ここにいることが僕の全てなんです。新選組の前に立ちふさがる敵を切る。ただそれだけなんですよ。
お前さんの覚悟は分かった。だがな、この 病は悪化すると周りの人に迷惑がかかる。それはわかるな。今後は私の言いつけを守ってもらわねばならんぞ。もし守れんのならすぐに近藤さんに言うからな。
それってまさか苦い薬とか飲まなきゃならないんですか？
当然だろうが、病人なんだからな。
Holy shit! Did the mic pick that up? I don't know. Oh my god.
まあ、困った人に知られちゃったな。
Okita sounded cheery, but I was listening in a state of shock. Okita is going to die? My chest was tight and breathing had become an effort. I leaned heavily against a nearby beam and struggled to hear the rest of the conversation. Matsumoto-sensei went quiet, his eyes looking off into the distance. Okita grinned and nudged him.
先生、近藤さんたちには言わないでくださいよ。約束ですからね。
He was quiet for a long time. At last he sighed and his shoulders slumped.
まあ、どうしても言えないことってのはあるだろうな。私もあの子に打ち明けていないことがあるんだ。
Eh? He looked up at the sky for a moment.
高堂さんが上位派の過激浪士連中と行動を共にしてるかもしれん。なんてな。とてもじゃないが伝えられんよ。
The news of Okita's illness had me so scattered, I almost cried out at this new piece of intelligence. My father, working with nationalists. Then Matsumoto-sensei did know something about where my father was.
世の中、ままならないものですね。
まったくだな。まあ、これからは頻繁に新選組に通ってお前さんのことを見てやる。だからくれぐれも無理はせんようにな。
分かってますよ。お気遣いありがとうございます。
I was lost in thought for a few moments, and when I finally looked up, Matsumoto-sensei was already gone. Okita had tuberculosis. Father was working with the men who wanted to overthrow the shogunate. My head was spinning. It was so much to take in. Just then, I suddenly heard him say my name and I froze. Wait, did he know I was here the whole time? My heart resumed beating, but was now beating so quickly that it seemed to burst my chest.
出ておいで。もういいから。
His deep eyes were looking straight towards me. So Okita had noticed I was here the whole time. I braced myself and approached him.
はい、こっちこっち。おいで。
He grinned coolly and patted the bench next to him. I couldn't bear to look into his eyes. My eyes trained purposefully on the ground at my feet. I slowly lowered myself onto the bench. The silence was maddening. My head felt somehow light and heavy at the same time, as if it might sink into my stomach or float away like a balloon. The silence was unbearable, so I spoke out.
さっきの松本先生の話だけど、まさか本気にしてないよね。
His words were defensive, as if he needed to tell himself that it weren't true. I was at a loss.
あの先生、悪い冗談が好きみたいだね。こんな健康な病人がいるはずないのに。でも冗談なら冗談で言う場所を選んでほしかったな。ここにはこうやって根も葉もない話を本気にするおバカさんがいるんだし。
Was it really all a joke? This was a doctor who was recognized in his field by the shogun, and it's unlikely he was wrong. Even so,
君、医者の娘なんでしょ？もし僕が本当に老害だったら、もっと早くに気づいてたはずだよね。君が今まで何とも思わなかったんだから、病気じゃないんだよ。
Holy shit! Considering Okita's condition, I couldn't imagine trying to burst his bubble. Nothing I could say would make the situation better.
誰にも言わないよね。もし誰かに言うつもりなら、やっぱり切らなくちゃならないかな。
I'd heard those words many times before, often delivered in a cheerful, casual tone. If I got in the way, he'd kill me. If I wasn't useful, he'd kill me. And every time I'd heard them, I'd been terrified by how serious he was. But this time, he only sounded sad. You say that so much, Okita. I could feel tears welling up in my eyes, but no, this wasn't the time. With a mighty effort, I swallowed the sob building in my chest. He gave me an odd, crooked smile.
そうかもね。
He stood up. After a second's hesitation, I followed suit. Okita. For the first time since I'd sat down, I looked straight into his eyes.
何？
My mind was still reeling from everything. I just learned, but I had to give him an answer. I won't tell anyone about your illness. I promise.
So, ありがとう。
His smile was gentle and as honest as I'd ever seen from him. After he left, I stood alone in the courtyard. It was the first time Okita had thanked me for anything. By all rights, I should have been happy, ecstatic even, but instead I felt miserable. My heart was a stone in my chest, and my stomach felt as if it had twisted itself nearly in half. Okita. A stray breeze caressed my cheek. It felt cold. Ah, right. So that is the scene where I actually respect Okita. This is where I start to actually like him. Holy fuck. I've been trying to figure out what the proper order to do this game in, and I think Okita's route has to be the first one you do. because of this scene alone, and because of all of the other routes, you find out he has this way too late. And it's kind of little bit ruins this moment in particular if you did. I think Okita's is first. But now that the scene is over, I'm going to save and get out of here because I'm afraid of what this thunder might do. So with that, unfortunate short stream is here, which is unfortunate, but I'd rather do it. If things are better later, we will come back for art stream at 8 EST. So yeah, I'll see you guys later. The thunder was both appropriate and inappropriate, but we'll live with it. Alright. See you guys later. Drink water, stretch your legs. We'll be back with art, maybe. Bye-bye.